The Subcommittee on Immigration and Citizenship will come to order, a quorum being present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time, and I want to welcome everyone to this afternoon's hearing, Is There a Doctor in the House? The Role of Immigrant Physicians in the U.S. Healthcare System. I'd like to remind members that we've established an email address and distribution list dedicated to circulating exhibits, motions, or other written materials that members might want to offer as part of our hearing today. If members would like to submit materials, please send them to the email address that has been previously distributed to your office, and we will circulate the materials to members and staff as quickly as we possibly can. I also ask all members to please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. This will help prevent feedback and other technical issues, and you can unmute yourself anytime you seek recognition. This hearing will explore the essential role of immigrant physicians in the provision of general and specialized health care in the United States. Access to high-quality healthcare has long been an issue of great importance throughout the United States, and unfortunately, for many, access to healthcare has been lacking due to a scarcity of physicians in their area. Our immigration system has long contemplated a need for physicians. Throughout the pandemic, immigrants in healthcare fields have served on the front lines and have been a driving force behind the research that led to the development of vaccines and cutting-edge COVID-19 treatments. Unfortunately, our antiquated immigration system discourages these needed physicians from coming to and remaining in the United States, which exacerbates a serious level of physician shortages. This hearing will allow the subcommittee to hear from witnesses who will discuss the current and future demand for physicians, the current process for foreign physicians to complete medical residencies and remain permanently in the United States, as well as the need for reforms to our immigration laws as they pertain to physician immigration. Now, I've chaired the Immigration Subcommittee in this Congress and in prior years, and one of the things I'm committed to doing is making sure that less senior members of the committee also have an opportunity to sit in the chair, have the opportunities to shape a hearing, and have the experience of presiding. With that in mind and without objection, my colleague, Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, will preside over this hearing, give her public statement, and also recognize our esteemed ranking member, Mr. McClintock. So I now recognize Ms. Scanlon for her opening statement and ask her to take the virtual chair. Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Chair Lofgren. I thank you virtually as I take the virtual chair. So thank you for the opportunity to chair today's hearing to discuss the importance of immigrant physicians in our healthcare system. The United States is currently facing a shortage of physicians. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, more than 86 million people live in areas with an insufficient number of primary care physicians. The coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated existing shortages as physicians across the country have been under extreme strain, causing some of them to leave their jobs. Sadly, some of our most dedicated frontline physicians have lost their lives in the fight against this pandemic. Immigrant physicians have been on the forefront of this fight, putting themselves in harm's way, even when for some of them, their death would leave family members without status and at risk for deportation. Foreign nationals make up about 25% of the population of those obtaining graduate medical education in the United States. The Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, the Philadelphia organization that certifies and sponsors foreign physicians who undergo medical training in the United States, reports that over 70% of the physicians they sponsor for training are pursuing graduate medical education in a primary care specialty. We cannot continue to attract foreign physicians to this country with an immigration system that doesn't take their dedication into consideration. Now, our current immigration system makes it difficult for immigrant physicians to work in the United States. For example, while our immigration laws seek to encourage immigrant physicians to work in rural and medically underserved areas, the pathways to legal status and work authorization in such areas are insufficient. The Conrad 30 program, which helps place immigrant physicians in underserved areas, only allocates a maximum of 30 slots in each state. My home state of Pennsylvania, which has the fourth highest number of immigrant physician exchange visitor trainees in the United States, in part because we have such a robust medical training system in the region, nearly always has more than 30 applicants for its Conrad slots. Additionally, the pathways to green cards for immigrant physicians involve decades-long backlogs for individuals from countries like India and China. These long waits discourage physicians from remaining in our country when they know they can travel elsewhere and obtain permanent residency in a matter of months. The lack of physicians is exacerbated by the fact that our population is aging. As more and more people in our country reach retirement age, we will need additional doctors to meet our nation's healthcare needs. Presently, 34% of the demand for physicians comes from patients 65 and up, and what is projected to only increase in the coming years. Meanwhile, over 2 of every 5 physicians in the United States will be 65 or older within the next 10 years. So those retirements are also creating additional pressure. It's imperative that we work to fix this problem now to ensure that Americans have access to the medical care they need. Immigrants play an important role in alleviating the physicians shortage. It's especially important that we address the problems immigrant physicians face as they disproportionately fill jobs in general medicine and gerontology, which face staffing shortages and underserved areas that badly need medical care. I'm looking forward to discussing the significant contribution of immigrant physicians to our healthcare system and the proposals to improve our immigration system to better utilize their talents. This is a bipartisan problem that requires bipartisan solutions, and I'm committed to working with my friends and colleagues across the aisle to find those solutions. So I wish to thank all of our witnesses for appearing today, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives. So it is now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for his opening statement. And we're so glad to see you here today.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your kind words. You know, in the time that the Democrats have controlled the executive branch, roughly 2 million illegal immigrants have been apprehended by Customs and Border Protection. And of these, roughly 1 million have been admitted into our country. And that doesn't include the hundreds of thousands of gotaways who've evaded apprehension while the Border Patrol's been inundated by migrants, responding to the unmistakable open borders invitation that this administration issued on day one. It is quite clear this policy is deliberate. As Secretary Mayorkas bragged last month, and I quote, "We have fundamentally changed immigration enforcement in the interior. For the first time ever, our policy explicitly states that a non-citizen's unlawful presence in the United States will not by itself be a basis for the initiation of enforcement action." Now, let me repeat that so it sinks in. Quote, "A non-citizen's unlawful presence in the United States will not by itself be a basis for enforcement action." Fellow Americans, if our immigration laws are not going to be enforced, we have no immigration laws. And if we have no immigration laws, we effectively have no border. And if we have no border, in very short order, we will have no country, just this vast international territory between Canada and Mexico. No civilization has ever survived the mass migration on this scale that the Democrats have been actively encouraging, aiding, and abetting since they took power. And history warns us that countries that either cannot or will not secure their borders simply aren't around very long. Now, in this deliberately created border chaos, individuals on the terrorist watch list are entering our country. Previously deported aliens who have committed murder and other crimes continue to enter our country. Now, this is the Immigration Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee. Republicans have begged the majority to address this crisis since they created it. Instead, the subcommittee's had 5 hearings, including this one. In 4 of the 5, the Democrats have focused on bringing additional foreign nationals into the United States. They have yet to explain how American workers are helped by flooding the market with cheap foreign labor, or how our schools are made better by flooding classrooms with non-English speaking students, or how our streets are made safer by refusing to deport criminal illegal aliens as the law requires. And they have yet to explain how our hospitals are made more accessible by packing emergency rooms with illegal aliens demanding care. Instead, their solution is to import still more foreign doctors to treat the exploding foreign population. Enough. As we will hear, there are thousands of US citizens who have earned their medical degrees at enormous cost, some carrying over $100,000 in debt to do so, but they cannot be placed in residency programs that make it possible for them to practice medicine. Furthermore, foreign nationals are already admitted to practice medicine in this country through a large number of visa programs. They qualify for J visas. 353,000 were issued in 2019. How many physicians were included? We don't know. They qualify for H-1B visas. 188,000 were issued in 2019. How many physicians among them? Unknown. They qualify for O visas. 18,000 were granted in 2019. How many physicians were included? Again, unknown. And they qualify for TN visas. 21,000 were issued. How many physicians? Unknown. Yet, as we will hear, the physician shortage in the United States is largely of our making. We have the doctors. We just don't match them with the residency programs they need to enter practice. Now, don't you think that just maybe we ought to put American physicians first? Don't you think just maybe we should take control of our borders before we encourage more foreign nationals to cross it? Don't you think just maybe we ought to enforce our immigration laws before our jails, our schools, our prisons, and our hospitals are completely overwhelmed? The American people are awakening to the damage that's being done by the left's open border policies. The proceedings today are just another attempt by the left toward meaningless borders. The American people know what that means to their families, their prosperity, their communities, their safety, their schools, and their health care. You know, when we put Americans first, we enjoyed the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the lowest poverty rate in 60 years, and the fastest wage growth in 40 years. I believe the American people are going to want those days back very soon, and that includes securing our borders. They're going to have the chance to set things right very soon, in about 266 days, I believe. I yield back.
Thank you for that, Mr. McClintock. I will now recognize the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our country has long relied on foreign educated physicians to supplement the domestic physician workforce. Today's hearing invites us to explore the role that immigrant physicians play in the provision of healthcare in the United States, including the essential services they provide to Americans in rural and medically underserved areas. I also appreciate the opportunity to examine how our broken immigration system has made it difficult for such physicians to remain in our communities and continue to provide critical care to those in need. Today, approximately 200,000 foreign medical graduates work as physicians in the United States. Immigrants account for more than 50% of physicians practicing geriatric medicine, approximately 40% of those practicing critical care and internal medicine, and nearly 1/4 of those practicing general medicine. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, experts were projecting that our country would experience a significant shortage of physicians in the near future. Due to the aging population and other factors, the American Association of Medical Colleges estimated a shortage of nearly 140,000 physicians by 2033. The COVID-19 outbreak has brought this problem into sharper focus. The pandemic has taken an enormous mental and physical toll on physicians in the United States, exacerbating existing shortages and making these projections even more dire. In response, governors throughout the country, including in my home state of New York, implemented emergency measures such as relaxing licensing requirements to increase the pool of available physicians. Yet many states still struggle to meet the demand for care. Unfortunately, our outdated immigration system only adds to the problem. Although foreign educated physicians can come to the United States to complete their medical training, their temporary visa options are limited. Without a visa classification that is designed specifically for them, foreign physicians are forced to deal with the challenges of a flawed system that was designed decades ago. After completing their training, if they want to stay here permanently and continue to treat patients in their communities, they must overcome additional obstacles. For example, the Conrad 30 program, which is intended to facilitate the placement of immigrant physicians in underserved areas by shortening the visa application process, only allows 30 such physicians in each state to benefit from this program. If a physician is fortunate enough to be allotted one of those visas, many must then wait for years and often decades for an immigrant visa to become available. Over the years, various bills have been introduced that would improve the physician immigration system. Some would exempt certain physicians from the numerical limits on immigrant visas. Others would remove or ease the current barriers while streamlining and improving processing. We should explore these and other options. We have an obligation to ensure that all Americans have ready access to quality medical care today and in the future. To do that, we must ensure that our immigration system facilitates rather than blocks the admission of the best doctors from around the world. I want to thank Chair Lofgren and Ms. Scanlon for holding this valuable hearing. I thank all of today's witnesses for participating in this important discussion, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Nadler. It is now my pleasure to introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. David J. Skorton. Dr. David Skorton is the president and CEO of the Association for American Medical Colleges, which is a nonprofit institution that represents the nation's medical schools. So these are American medical schools, teaching hospitals, and health systems and academic societies. Prior to becoming the president and CEO of the Association of American Medical Colleges in 2019, Dr. Skorton served as the 13th Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution and as the president of two universities, Cornell University and the University of Iowa. Dr. Skorton received both his BA and his MD from Northwestern University. We also welcome Dr. Raghuvir Kura. He's an interventional nephrologist at the Poplar Bluff Regional Medical Center. Following his medical education at the Armed Forces Medical College in Pune, India, Dr. Kura came to the United States in 2003 to undergo graduate medical education in internal medicine and nephrology at Penn State Milton S. Hershey Medical Center and College of Medicine. Dr. Kura is the only nephrologist serving the small town of Poplar Bluff, Missouri. In 2021, Dr. Kura received his green card under the EB1 category as a, quote, alien of extraordinary ability, end quote. Despite the freedom of movement his green card affords, Dr. Kura has chosen to remain in Poplar Bluff, a medically underserved area, to treat his patients. We also welcome Kristen Harris, principal of Harris Immigration Law, LLC. Having practiced immigration law exclusively for the past 17 years, Ms. Harris advises healthcare entities across the United States regarding immigration, including sponsorship of physicians, researchers, allied healthcare professionals, and technical professionals, as well as E-Verify and I-9 compliance. Additionally, Ms. Harris works with the American Medical Association, the American Association of Medical Colleges, and the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, which is based in Philadelphia, on physician immigration issues. Ms. Harris received her bachelor's degree from Yale University and her JD from the University of Michigan Law School. We are also joined by Kevin Lynn. Mr. Lynn is the co-founder of Doctors Without Jobs and the executive director of Progressives for Immigration Reform. Previously, Mr. Lynn served in a variety of roles in the private sector, including as a director at Ryan LLC and as a senior manager at Ernst & Young. Mr. Lynn has served in a volunteer capacity at several organizations, including Respect Farmland, Democracy for America, and the 1992 Ross Perot campaign. Mr. Lynn was a captain in the United States Army and received an Associate of Arts degree from Kemper Military College. So we welcome all of our distinguished witnesses and thank them for participating in today's hearing. I'll begin by swearing in our witnesses. I'd ask that you each make sure your audio is on and that we can see your face and your raised right hand while we administer the oath. I think Dr. Cora, you need to unmute as well. Great, thank you. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Thank you so much. Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. And please note that each of your written statements will be entered into the record in its entirety. And we'll just ask everyone, witnesses and members of Congress, to keep their mute button on when they're not speaking so that we can try to minimize chaos. And witnesses, I'd ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, and to help you keep track and stay within the time, there is a timer on your screen, which you'll see. So Dr. Skorton, if you could lead us off, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Adler and Chair Scanlon and Chair Lofgren and Ranking Member McClintock and members of the subcommittee. Immigration is the bedrock of the United States. It is because of our diversity of backgrounds, cultures, and ideas that we have thrived, not in spite of it. I have been fortunate to work in education, government, and healthcare, and have seen firsthand the value immigrants bring to this country across the board, even in my immigrant father's family-owned shoe store. Approximately 23% of physicians practicing in the US identify as foreign-born. These physicians help improve access to care, particularly for patients in rural and other underserved areas, but many face significant challenges to enter and remain in the US. Physician diversity has been widely recognized as key to excellence in medicine and quality care. Physicians from other countries have a unique cultural perspective which can affect patients' health and their healthcare experiences. The importance of physicians from other countries was seen acutely during the pandemic, but is amplified each year as a result of growing nationwide health workforce shortages. The AAMC projects the overall physician shortage will grow to a total of up to 124,000 physicians by 2034. Simply put, we need more doctors from everywhere. Academic medicine has responded by increasing enrollment by 35% over the last 2 decades, including opening 30 new medical schools, and 6 more have applied to be considered for accreditation. However, increasing medical school enrollment without commensurate increases in graduate medical education residency positions has no effect on the size of the workforce, because medical residency training is required for licensure and medical practice. The AAMC recommends a multi-pronged approach that includes increasing the number of Medicare-supported residency positions, as well as improving the immigration processes for physicians and for teaching hospitals. Residency program directors seek the best candidates, regardless of citizenship status or national origin, through a highly competitive selection process. And some students may be unable to find a residency position in the US. Last year, 55% of non-US graduates of international medical schools matched to a residency program. Comparatively, 93% of US seniors matched to a residency program, and 99% of US medical school graduates enter residency or full-time practice within 6 years. I can confidently say that physicians from other countries are not displacing graduates of US medical schools. For non-US physicians who are fortunate to make it through rigorous medical education, examinations, screening, and obtain a residency position, the 3 months between the match and program start dates is a critical immigration window. The AAMC humbly offers to work with the subcommittee on ways to help ensure the physician immigration process is predictable, expedient, efficient, and better aligned with a continuum of medical education, training, and state licensure. In addition, the AAMC supports the Conrad 30 program that has recruited 15,000 physicians to rural and underserved communities over the last 15 years by waiving the J-1 visa home country return requirement. The AAMC endorses the bipartisan Conrad State 30 and Physician Access Reauthorization Act, which, among other improvements, would allow the program to expand beyond 30 slots per state if certain nationwide thresholds are met. We are glad that Congress has recognized the vital role of the National Health Service Corps by steadily increasing funding and believe the number of Conrad 30 waivers should likewise be increased for the first time in 2 decades. The AAMC also urges Congress to pass a permanent pathway to citizenship for individuals with DACA status, such as the Bipartisan DREAM Act of 2021 or the House-passed American Dream and Promise Act of 2021. The 34,000 current healthcare providers with DACA status encompass a diverse, multi-ethnic population who are often bilingual and more likely to practice in underserved communities. Finally, the AAMC supports reducing green card backlogs and prioritizing healthcare workers through the Bipartisan Healthcare Workforce Resilience Act. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify regarding the critical importance of physician immigration to the U.S. healthcare system.
Thank you, Dr. Skorton, and thank you for your well-timed presentation. Dr. Cora, you're up next. You have 5 minutes.
Chair Nadler, Chair Lofgren, Chair Scanlon, Ranking Member McClintock, honorable members of the committee, it is an honor to speak with you today on this urgent public health issue. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my perspective on an issue I understand firsthand as an immigrant physician serving in rural and underserved areas. The United States is in the midst of a healthcare workforce crisis. We are facing an ever-growing shortage of doctors, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The reality is this healthcare worker shortage existed before the pandemic and will continue to harm communities, particularly rural and underserved communities absent congressional action. I came to the United States in 2001, completed my residency in internal medicine, fellowship in nephrology at Penn State University on a J-1 visa. As a condition of my visa, after completing my residency, I either had to return to India for 2 years before applying for a new visa or apply for a Conrad 30 program, which waives the 2-year home residency requirement if I would practice in a designated underserved area for a minimum of 3 years. Upon arriving in Missouri, I learned of patients traveling 80 miles to see the nearest nephrologist. In fact, I was the only 24/7 for the past 11 years to serve the community I now call home. Despite the visa restrictions, serving in Southeast Missouri for the last 11 years had been an incredibly fulfilling mission. I supported building a new dialysis unit in 2015, which now has about 90 patients receiving dialysis every other day, along with 18 staff members. Currently, I'm the director of 1 inpatient and 3 outpatient dialysis units across Southeast Missouri. I'm proud to support my patients, their families, my staff, and the local economy in Southeast Missouri. But these visa restrictions have greatly impacted many physicians like me and the communities we serve. For many international physicians, the pathway to permanent residency will take decades, limiting our career mobility and jeopardizing the immigrant status of our children. Doctors on the temporary H-1B visa may only work for their visa sponsors and are not allowed to start their own practices, work outside their specific practice area, or even volunteer. These restrictions are not hidden from international physicians like me, but they are inevitably impact our patients with sometimes life and death consequences. The COVID-19 pandemic complicated these issues when highly skilled physicians could not lend support to hospitals in need due to their visa restrictions. Legislation to confront this challenge is pending before Congress and could help save American lives. I would like to share how these issues personally affected me, my family, and my patients. The H-1B visa mandates every physician to apply for a renewal every 3 years, leaving the country for a stamp on their passport in order to freely move across the border. In 2019, I chose to go to Canada as it was closer and would allow me to quickly return to my patients, who must have a supervising physician on site to receive their care. Unfortunately, my renewal was delayed due to an unforeseen administrative processing issue, even though I had been in the country for 16 years and was pre-approved for a green card. The added stress of finding a physician to cover for me while dealing with the complicated immigration process took a toll on me and my family. The uncertainty was so stressful that I began applying for jobs in Canada and received offers of employment, but I did not want to leave my patients. So I reached out to my representatives for help and was able to come back to my patients in a timely fashion. Given this overwhelming need, Congress should take a closer look at the bipartisan legislation for further incentivizing physicians like me to serve in underserved areas. The Conrad 30 reauthorization would strengthen the incentives for international physicians to complete the residencies in the United States and practice in underserved areas, maximizing the return on investment that Congress makes in graduate medical education. This legislation would also provide greater clarity to physicians who fulfill their visa obligations, strengthening the incentives to serve in rural and underserved areas. In 2020, after applying for EB-1 Extraordinary Ability Visa, I was fortunate enough to get my green card. I'm grateful that my family no longer has to deal with the uncertainty of my H-1B status, but there are many physicians like me who are not so lucky. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kura. Ms. Harris, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Lofgren, Chair Scanlon, Ranking Member McClintock, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the need for improvements to our nation's physician immigration system. My name is Kristen Harris, and I'm an immigration attorney that has represented hundreds of hospitals, healthcare systems, physician practice groups, clinics, and foreign national physicians for more than 17 years. The opinions I am expressing today derive from years of physician immigration practice. At no time have Americans been in greater need of high-quality, U.S.-trained foreign national physicians. Dr. Kura and his dedication to his patients exemplifies how critical these physicians are to addressing our healthcare access issues. Unfortunately, our current system is suboptimal at best in its ability to attract and retain the most talented physicians in the world to treat and care for Americans. We have outdated laws on our books that include barriers to retaining U.S.-trained foreign national physicians. Today, I bring you concrete examples of missed opportunities caused by our current physician immigration system. In each case, we have a willing employer, a U.S.-trained physician, and Americans in need of a doctor. 1, we need to improve and expand the Conrad 30 program. Under this program, doctors in J status who would otherwise have to leave the U.S. at the end of their training can stay here if they treat patients in a medically underserved area for 3 years. Each state is allotted only 30 waivers per year, a limit that was last raised in 2002. The program has successfully brought thousands of U.S. trained physicians to medically underserved communities, but it can do more if it is expanded and improved. States like Texas, Indiana, California, Pennsylvania, and many more regularly max out of their 30 slots early in the year. For example, our firm represents an independent safety net hospital in one of the poorest cities in Massachusetts. The hospital sponsored an Indian-born, U.S.-trained primary care physician for a Conrad waiver. It timely filed the application. The physician was fully eligible, but the state program had maxed out for the year, and the physician was not among the lucky 30 that year. By the time the recommendations were announced, he was out of options and moved to Canada with his family to practice there. This happens time and again. By expanding the number of waivers available to each state, Congress can solve this problem. 2, we need to improve the J waiver options for federal agencies such as the VA and HHS to carry out important programs such as treating veterans and the medically underserved. The statute provides for greater opportunities than is administered by the agencies at present. For example, my firm represents nephrology practices, including a practice that continues to find U.S.-trained J1 physicians who are ready, willing, and able to start treating dialysis patients, but for their need for a J waiver. They haven't been able to do that. Any one such nephrologist can cover 13 practice sites stretched across a 5-county area, including outpatient dialysis clinics and rural areas in Indiana so remote and so underserved that the Department of Labor does not have sufficient wage data for doctors. Unique patient visits for one physician can exceed 200 patients in a month. Yet this practice cannot apply to the HHS program to keep these physicians in the US because they have received subspecialty training. This must change. 3, we need to change the H-1B category for U.S. trained physicians. Many physicians apply for the H-1B visa after completing their training, but there is an H-1B cap or limit, which can serve as a barrier to physician immigration. For example, our firm represents a family-owned medical practice in Texas. For months, they have searched for a US-trained and licensed primary care physician to start patient care yesterday. They found the perfect candidate who's bilingual and ready to relocate from Peru to Texas. Unfortunately, before the doctor can start working here, she must first participate in the random HCAP lottery held in March. Statistically, the odds are against her getting selected at all. Even if the doctor does win the lottery and her age is approved, her visa won't allow her to start treating Texans until October at the earliest. This is at least 8 months of lost care and coverage. This must change. Congress should exempt physicians from the HCAP limit to address our nation's immediate healthcare needs. Fourth and finally, the employment-based green card system needs to be fixed to keep our US trained doctors in the country on a permanent basis. Doctors born in India can wait for over a decade before they're permitted to even file their final step for a green card due to current per-country limits, even when their services to the medically underserved have been deemed to be in the national interest by USCIS. This is wrong. These physicians fill an immediate need for Americans and therefore should be permitted to file a green card immediately, just as with immediate relatives of US citizens. Healthcare access is a bipartisan constituent issue that requires bipartisan solutions. The solutions presented today are well within congressional reach, and our nation will benefit from Congress working together to improve healthcare access for all Americans by making it easier for us to retain our US-trained physician workforce. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and thank you for your attention to this critical issue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lynn, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. I think we need you to unmute. I think we're still having a technical problem. It looks like you unmuted. Not hearing anything yet. Nope, I can see that you're talking, but it's not coming through. Can our tech folks help us here? Okay, let's suspend the hearing for a minute while we work on the technical issue, and we will be back in a minute. Our tech folks are working on it, so the committee will suspend.
I'm going to go back to, okay.
That seems to be coming through.
Okay, I'm coming through now, Chairwoman Scanlon? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Chairwoman Lofgren, Chair Scanlon, Ranking Member McClintock, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to discuss the consequences of immigrant physicians in the U.S. healthcare system. The United States is facing a doctor shortage. However, it is a shortage of our own making. In recent years, thousands of American medical doctors have been denied the right to practice medicine. This is one of the most unreported stories and one of the most ignored situations by our elected officials and medical community, leadership in America, including our medical schools and the various governing bodies who represent physicians. In 2018, Progressives for Immigration Reform started the Doctors Without Jobs Project to build awareness of the number of U.S. citizen doctors graduating from medical schools who were not matching to residency positions each year, while foreign trained physicians were. This encouraged more doctors to advocate for themselves and push back against graduate medical education profiteers. The match is the mechanism by which medical school graduates move into medical residencies at teaching hospitals. It is a process managed by the National Residence Matching Program. Please understand that without a medical residency, a doctor cannot practice medicine, and a residency may require 3 to 7 years to complete, depending on the specialty. Each year, over 7,000 U.S. citizens and lawful permanent resident medical graduate physicians, which include seniors and prior year graduates, do not match for a medical residency. All of whom are qualified, ready, and willing doctors who have been sidelined and are waiting to serve their communities now. A situation we worked to draw attention to at the start of the pandemic so that they might be deployed. Our call went unanswered. There is much more to this story that should concern the subcommittee. In 2021, over 4,000 non-citizen foreign-trained physicians received residencies in the U.S. This is an enormous increase from 10 years prior, where 2,700 foreign-trained physicians received residencies. Between 2011 and 2021, more than 40,000 non-U.S. citizens, foreign-trained physicians were given U.S. taxpayer-funded residencies. Each residency costs taxpayers $150,000 a year. So we are subsidizing foreign doctors. Many foreign trained physicians arrive in the US for residency training via the J-1 visa, a cultural exchange visa. In addition, foreign trained physicians arrive via the H-1B visa program to work directly in hospitals. In 2020, over 3,500 labor condition applications were filed for 4,252 workers for the occupation of medical doctor. Of those, over 3,000 were approved. In addition, over 5,000 applications to extend from prior years were also approved. Every country prioritizes its citizens. Canada, the last holdout, has changed its policy to prioritize Canadian citizens and permanent legal residents a couple years ago. Failure to prioritize Americans is emblematic of our medical establishment preferring to import foreign healthcare workers instead of making necessary investments that would broaden medical education and improve our healthcare delivery infrastructure. This doesn't just cause problems here at home. A 2020 Migration Policy Institute article titled "Global Demand for Medical Professionals Drives Indians Abroad Despite Acute Domestic Healthcare Worker Shortages" describes the brain drain and the harm it does to India's healthcare system. The same can be said for countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where healthcare professionals are also lured to the US, UK, and Canada. A poor country's loss is a rich country's gain. The estimated financial benefit to the United States from luring physicians from sub-Saharan Africa is believed to be in and around $846 million. The sending countries lose about $2.1 billion from the investments made in their doctors who leave. According to survey data, in 2020, roughly 70% of doctors in the US were born here. About 20% were naturalized, some 7% are non-citizens. These percentages have remained fairly consistent over the past 10 years. Every area of American endeavor has been impacted by relentless importation of foreign workers, starting with lower paying work, seasonal hospitality workers, and then on to manufacturing, to technology workers, and now to doctors who have spent at least 8 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to practice the healing arts, a very specialized profession, only to be sidelined and saddled with debt they are unlikely to be able to pay off if they can't practice medicine. The demand and enthusiasm to enter the medical profession is there. Applications to medical schools are at an all-time high. as are enrollments in the nation's nursing programs. We have thousands of physicians in line waiting for residency training. We need more residency positions, and we must prioritize U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Thank you all for your testimony. We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions, and I'll begin by recognizing myself. Dr. Skorton, let me start with you. As you described in your testimony, the AAMC has done a great deal of research on the physician shortage. According to that research, what are the main drivers of physician shortage in the United States?
Thank you, Chair Scanlon. There's really 5 factors. The first one is the happy fact that our country is growing. The second is the fact that our country is aging. And with age, as was mentioned in opening remarks for members of the subcommittee, will come the necessity of greater need for healthcare. Thirdly, the healthcare workforce is aging. I'm an example of that. I'm proudly in the over 65 crowd. And at a certain point, like every other kind of worker, the medical worker in the over 65 will decide to retire. And because of the big hump of humanity in the boomers, we're seeing more retirement. The fourth, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, and I'll reiterate very briefly, just the fact that we've increased the number of first-year medical students by over 1/3 is not enough to make a difference because of the need for graduate medical education slots. And we're still not getting the job done, something about which we all, I believe, agree. And then finally, a special, more recent phenomenon, and that is the stress of COVID-19 on the country, of course, has been dramatic and terrible. It has also been dramatic and terrible on the healthcare workforce. We have lost people to COVID. We have lost people to behavioral health problems, even suicide related to the stresses of COVID, as best exemplified by Dr. Lorna Breen in New York at New York Presbyterian Allen Hospital. And then this has led to some physicians deciding that they wanted to retire earlier than planned, or if not retire, to perhaps reduce their hours. So those 5 factors are the ones that we believe are leading to this continuing shortage. And let me just take a quick prerogative, since I have the floor, to say that we need doctors in all disciplines, certainly primary care, certainly behavioral health, but also every specialty that you can imagine. We need them in urban areas, we need them in rural areas, we need them in well-served areas, we need them in underserved areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Skorton. Dr. Kura, we appreciate the excellence and dedication that you and your non-USA born colleagues bring with your attendance at US medical colleges and research institutions and your treatment of folks in our communities. You noted in your testimony that you're the only nephrologist in the area that you serve. Has your employer attempted to recruit other nephrologists to that area? And if so, why weren't those efforts successful?
Thank you, Congresswoman Scanlon. Yes, when I first came to Poplar Bluff, that was back in 2010, I never thought I would be staying here for more than 3 years. Once I start hearing stories from the patients and the amount of stress they have to go through, that made me decide that I have to take. In 2012, I've reached out to my nearest dialysis folks and said, I want to build a dialysis unit for people because they're not able to get adequate footing here. So that helped me start a new dialysis unit, and it was done by 2015. And the dialysis unit at that point had only about 15 to 20 patients. Now I have 90 patients, and the volume is increasing. Yes, we do need more nephrologists. We have an advertisement out there for the past 10 years to get nephrologists or to hire nephrologists, and I need partner. I mean, I cannot be working like this for the next 10 years. I was 35 when I started this, and I'm 46 now. There is always a shortage of physicians and staff here. The people do not want to come here due to its geographical location. There is not a lot to offer other than healthcare here, and people want to fly out. The best thing they see, the first thing they see, how far is St. Louis from here? It's about 2.5 hours. So that deters them from coming to rural areas as such. And I want to grow this place. I want to help people here. I have established my roots. I have established relations with my patients. I mean, they know my family, but unfortunately, I'm not able to get help. We need some kind of legislative act in order to get more help.
Thank you. Ms. Harris, can you very briefly add what would be the number one thing you think Congress should do to help ease this issue? I know your extended testimony is in the record.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the biggest fixes, honestly, would be to exempt physicians. There are a number of ways to do this from the per country limits. That would be huge.
Thank you. I see my time has expired, and I believe Representative McClintock, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Lynn, do we have data on how many American healthcare workers have been fired from their jobs because they declined mandated vaccinations? I've seen one report putting the number at over 10,000. Mr. Lynn, you're muted.
Thank you, Ranking Member McClintock. I have not been studying data on fired physicians, but I know, anecdotally speaking, in California, where I lived for 20 years, as well as here in Pennsylvania, and where I have relatives in New York, I have many family members who are in the healthcare industry, and they're being literally threatened with either take the jab or
Well, again, I would think 10,000 fired because in their own medical judgment, they should not be taking the vaccine. That's a significant number. You know, we're told the growing population needs more doctors, and that makes sense as far as it goes. But much of the population growth has been because of an unprecedented increase in foreign nationals entering the country both legally and illegally. Seems to me this is putting us in a feedback loop where the more foreign nationals enter the United States, the more foreign doctors we're told we need to import. Is this a sustainable strategy?
No, it's the strategy itself is unsustainable because ultimately you cannot have infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. Roughly 80% of all population growth in the United States is attributable to immigrants and the children of immigrants. I myself am the child of an immigrant. So we have to understand that there is a push factor as well as a pull factor in this. And yes, a rising population is certainly a factor. We have also been seeing move to states such as the Carolinas, to the Southwest, to states like Georgia of populations over the past 3 decades. And because we froze the number of residencies in 1997, we have not been able to, one, build teaching or expand medical education programs in these areas and expand teaching hospitals in these areas.
So we basically made it more difficult for us to produce doctors among Americans, correct?
Absolutely. That is absolutely the case. And the costs are just so prohibitive as well. But despite that, there's huge demand.
Can you share with us a couple of stories of medical school graduates and doctors without jobs who've not been able to get jobs as physicians in the US?
Oh, absolutely. The co-founder of Doctors Without Jobs, Dr. Doug Medina, was never able to match. I know of at least several that I can tell you point blank where we talk about suicide. Well, I mean, imagine you're straddled with over $400,000 in debt, and your income is you're getting income from Uber, as well as working a job that might be paying $15 an hour, working on a dock, which is someone that I know is doing that. And you have over $400,000 in student loans, and the interest is accumulating.
And these are physicians who have received their medical degrees, so it's not a question of competence.
Absolutely. All of them have received either a medical degree here in the United States or in a foreign degree program.
Has the rate of unmatched physicians increased or decreased in recent years?
It actually increased. Last year, it was 1,431 US trained physicians, and total, it was over 7,000. So we actually saw an increase in the unmatched numbers from US medical schools and a small decrease in US citizens lawful permanent residents who studied abroad.
Now,
So
let's be clear on this point. If you're not matched, if you've received your medical degree, you are a medical doctor, but you cannot match with the residency program, you can't practice medicine. Do I have that right?
that's absolutely correct, sir.
And that's
You-
and that is a situation that is affecting over 10,000 US doctors at this moment.
Absolutely. And all of them could have been deployed during COVID. There were opportunities to do that, particularly July 1st, 2020, when foreign trained physicians needed to be at
Okay.
their residency positions.
Okay, so we've refused to match over 10,000 Americans who have their medical degrees. We fired 10,000 healthcare workers because in their professional medical judgment, they should not be receiving a vaccine. That's 20,000 right there. And yet we're told the only answer is import more foreign nationals. Does that pretty much sum up this hearing so far?
It does sum it up. There's just this bias to not really address the infrastructure problems, the hard problems that require investment in Americans and American institutions. And as always, the panacea is to import foreign workers.
Well,
Again,
Thank
whether
you.
it's
The gentleman's time has expired. With that, I would recognize Mr. Nadler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Scorton, AAMC has conducted a great deal of research on the provision of healthcare in the United States. Can you discuss how living in a medically underserved area impacts a person's health? And does this include a decrease in the likelihood that they'll seek out regular medical checkups?
Thank you, Chairman Nadler. It's a very, very important question. I'm glad to have a chance to answer it. There's really two big issues here. In any underserved area, whether it's in an urban area, rural area, any underserved area, people by definition will not have access either to preventive services, for example, like cancer screening, or to therapeutic services. And non-communicable chronic diseases, like the type that Dr. Kura deals with, kidney failure, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, these are things that require ongoing medical care, as well as cancer screening. And one of the big concerns that we have, Mr. Chairman, in terms of COVID, is people stepping away from getting cancer screenings during COVID. In addition to those things that I mentioned, behavioral health services are at a premium, and we need that very, very much in our country for a wide variety of reasons, including the epidemic of substance use disorders. So that's one set of things. The other set, which is huge, is in addition to these healthcare or medical related items, there are the so-called social determinants of health. And it turns out that the things that affect our health most strongly are these social determinants of health. The ability to live in an area where we have clean air, clean water, safe streets, and so on are very, very important. And the precursors to social determinants of health, racism and poverty, have an enormous effect on people and frequently in underserved areas. So there are the medical issues, and then there are these social determinants of health. And both of these contribute to the problems. And thank you for the question, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Kura, since receiving your green card, you and your wife can now live and work anywhere in the United States. Why have you chosen to remain in Poplar Bluff, Missouri?
Thank you, Chair Nadler, for the question. As I've mentioned, I have come to Poplar Bluff about 10 years ago. And as time went on, and I had my children, and my wife is a physician too. She works in about 30 miles from here, a place called Sykeston. I built a dialysis unit, seeing the need that there are patients who need more room. There's growing population, there's aging population. I started, working more, and with the rest, although I had restrictions to do what I could, being on a visa, I could get a loan from a bank. I built a dialysis unit. Now it has about 18 staff members, and this dialysis unit has grown. Now I'm the director, and I consider this as my home now. I have been in India for about 25 years, and I have been in the United States for almost 20 years. This I consider as my home, And this place called Poplar Bluff is where I grew. I have my roots. My patients know my children, and it's difficult for me to just pack my bags and go or detach from my patients who look upon to me as their family. I cannot just leave this place. I have to proceed with what I have at this moment.
Ms. Harris, we heard from Dr. Kerr about some of the challenges he faced, from the difficulties he experienced obtaining his visa abroad, the logistical challenges once in the United States, and the long wait on the green card backlog. Would you say that this experience is a common one for physicians coming to the United States, especially from countries like India?
Yes, unfortunately, I can say that he actually exemplifies the problems that we see again and again. If I could just take a quick moment to say in what ways. One is the way that he went straight from graduate medical training to a medically underserved area and then stayed there. But two, the fact that even though he started there over 10 years ago, and even though he filed what's called a Physician National Interest Waiver petition, even though he worked there for 5 years in an underserved area, he still didn't get to file his last green card step until he was able to prove he had extraordinary ability in the EB1 category. So this is a real example of our system being broken and not showing the benefits and appreciation and incentives to somebody who might not have Dr. Kerr's altruism to stay in that area. So it's a real example of how broken our green card system is. One other thing that's very sad, and it often happens to physicians and their patients, when they go to get a visa abroad, they are planning on coming back. Their patients are planning on them coming back on time. So what's a mere, week or two or several months to a consulate, which might not seem huge from their perspective, when it comes to these physicians and their medically underserved patients, it's really, really significant when they get held up abroad at the consulate.
Thank you. My time is expired. I yield back.
Thank you very much. I see that Mr. Buck isn't with us right now, so I recognize Representative Biggs for 5 minutes.
Thank the chair. This is the 5th hearing that the Immigration Committee, this subcommittee, has held this Congress. None of the hearings have focused on the Biden border crisis. None of the memorandums that the majority has prepared for the 5 hearings even mention the border crisis, which means that the context of this hearing is out of whack a little bit. Based on the materials prepared and circulated by the majority, you wouldn't even know that there is a border crisis. Perhaps you're in denial. Maybe you're in denial that we're experiencing the worst border crisis in our history. Maybe you're in denial that the policies implemented by President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas are making the crisis worse. And maybe you're hoping that if you don't acknowledge the crisis, the American people will not realize just how big a crisis we have on the southern border. If that's the plan, I don't think it'll work. Since President Biden took office, CBP has encountered more than 2 million illegal aliens at our southern border. That doesn't include the gotaways. And during that time, DHS has released hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens into our communities, by some estimates over 800,000, all in violation of the law. During that time, Secretary Mayorkas has abused the very limited authority that Congress has given him to parole aliens into the country by paroling at least 70,000 illegal aliens into the country. That's not normal. And I suspect that the actual number is probably higher. Additionally, we know that CBP is interdicting only a small amount of the illegal drugs that cross our border. The estimate that I was told by CBP individuals just 2 weeks ago was that maybe 5 to 10%. And that includes fentanyl, which according to CDC data has killed more Americans age 18 to 45 than COVID did in the last 2 years. And what is the majority focused on today? Not the Biden border crisis and not Secretary Mayorkas' failures. The majority won't even call Secretary Mayorkas to testify before this committee, which has jurisdiction. Once again, Madam Chair, I call upon our committee chair to request a full hearing with Secretary Mayorkas so we can conduct proper oversight. Democrats are here today arguing that we need to import more foreign doctors, but I have not heard a single one of them criticize President Biden's vaccine mandate, which forced hospitals to fire doctors. In fact, in her opening statement, the Representative Scanlon mentioned many numbers of causes and many reasons why doctors and healthcare providers are leaving the field in droves, and that we don't have enough doctors. But she left out one reason, and I'll only mention one today. For more than a year, doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals were on the forefront, the front lines of providing care during the COVID outbreak. Many of them, including many folks, including some on this subcommittee, praised these professionals as heroes. And while we face the shortages in the medical field highlighted by the chair and others on the subcommittee, some of these same supporters changed course and demanded that tens of thousands of these heroes who chose not to be vaxxed be terminated from their jobs. That doesn't make sense to me. President Biden effectively fired all of the unvaccinated healthcare workers in America. So here's the way to think of it. There's one article talking about more than 30,000 healthcare workers out of jobs in New York alone because of vax mandates. And at the same time, what adds to the strangeness of all of it is that you have doctors being fired for not receiving a COVID-19 vaccine, but hospitals allowing COVID-19 positive healthcare workers to continue working. If we need more doctors, then a logical first step would be not to fire the doctors we currently have, unless they're incompetent. Mr. Lynn, thanks for being here today. There's been a systematic effort by some to replace American workers with foreign workers. Thanks for your work that you're shedding light on this area. Is there a reason, Mr. Lynn, that foreign-born medical school graduates are getting taxpayer-funded residency positions over American doctors?
I'm gobsmacked by it. It would be one thing prior to 1980, there was a situation that existed where we weren't filling the residencies available. So you could see where at that point, there would be some a mechanism to help fill that with foreign trained physicians, and we did. However, that is not the case today. As I've testified, there are thousands of doctors every year who are US citizens or here or lawful permanent residents that are not getting residency positions. They've gone through 8 years of education. It's not like when you're an attorney, you're told that, well, you have to pass the bar in a specific state. I mean, I don't think anyone told them that, wow, your chances of becoming a doctor after you've graduated as a doctor were 50-50 or, 1 in 10. I think that would be a little more fair if they would begin on, informing them of the current day risk. But no, I don't see a need at this point to continue on with the number of foreign trained physicians. We have the doctors right here in the US.
Mr. Lynn, my time has expired. Madam Chair, I have 2 articles I'd like to submit to the record. One entitled Termination of Unvaccinated Healthcare Workers Backfires as Biden Pledges Help Amid COVID Surge. Another entitled Health Officials Let COVID Infected Staff Stay on the Job. And I'll provide those copies to the committee.
Without objection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'm sorry. I would recognize Representative Jayapal for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The pandemic has taken a tremendous toll on our brave healthcare workers, and as countries around the world compete for medical talent, the United States is at a disadvantage. Currently, there are more than 1 million individuals stuck in the employment-based visa backlog, and about 16,000 of those people are physicians. These backlogs make it incredibly difficult to attract qualified healthcare workers to come and work here. Recently, my home state of Washington passed a law allowing internationally trained medical graduates the chance to obtain renewable 2-year medical licenses to work as doctors. This is an important step, but Congress also has to take action to allow immigrant medical professionals the chance to work in their chosen field and to serve our country in this difficult time. Dr. Kura, your story resonated very strongly with me. I think I may be the only member of the Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee to be on an H-1B, to have been on an H-1B visa. Took me 17 years of an alphabet soup to ultimately get my citizenship. And I'm grateful to you for your service to our country as a physician. In your testimony, you talk about the difficulties that you face, the uncertainty of your immigration status, the harassment when coming back into the United States, and more. You already have a very demanding job as the only nephrologist serving your area for many years. And I understand it took you almost 20 years just to get your green card. Briefly, can you tell me how receiving your green card changed life for you and your family? And did it open up new opportunities for you to have that green card?
Well, green card is new to me. I've just, after longing for about 15 or 11 years of hardship and 9 years of residency fellowship prior to that, total of about 20 years, I could finally get it in 2020. It is relatively new. Prior to obtaining green card, I could do only so much. I tried to work in a place called Sykeston. I tried to establish myself in rural areas other than Poplar Bluff. I got a letter from USCIS stating I have to show how many hours I would be spending, at what time I would be spending, in which ER, in which ICU, in which hospital. And I cannot answer that question. No doctor is, it's impossible for any physician to tell which ER he's going to be, which patient is going to appear in which ICU, where do I have to perform or get dialysis or urgently take care of the patient. I withdrew my application for my extension of H-1B, or it's called adjunct H-1B. And the end point is not me. The end point is the healthcare that is getting affected because there's nobody else to take care of those patients, and the hospitals have to ship them 2 hours away to St. Louis or to Memphis. Such is the condition of current status. Now, after getting my green card, I could establish myself. I do not have to prove to my sponsors that I'm going there or I'm going to a different place to work. I can just apply for my credentials, and once I'm credentialed, I can work in those hospitals, take care of the patients.
And one of the first things you did was to start building an urgent care facility, right?
Correct.
Right
I am. Now, in my hometown, we have only one urgent care. We're seeing about 230 to 250 patients from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I decided to build one more urgent care. The plans are in place. We're going to start digging next month. And this is going to cost me quite a bit, but I'm willing to do that because this place needs it. And the only way I can do this is by the ability to have a green card. If I was on a H-1B, I don't think I will be able to do this.
Dr. Kaura, if you could choose all over again, knowing what you know now, would you still choose the United States, or would you go somewhere else that's more welcoming and allowing of immigrant doctors?
Okay, that's a difficult question to answer because to every person, when at the age of 25 or 24, when he looks at the United States, the dream place, it's the land of opportunity. It's the place where I can shine because I'm talented. I closely relate myself to the IT professionals who have come here and now are the CEOs of big companies. And I'm pretty sure the United States is proud of that. And likewise, I'm in the medical field. Unfortunately, they could get their green cards early and be where they are, but I could not get my green card till about 2 years ago. So looking back at everything, if I had a crystal ball, and if I could see myself today talking to you all, I would not probably have chosen the United States. I probably would have gone to Canada to prove my mettle, to prove my worth, and probably I would have been in a better spot. However, after establishing myself, putting my time and effort and energy into this place for such a long time, I cannot detach myself. I'm going to rise. I'm going to go strong at this point.
We are so grateful to you. And Madam Chair, my time has expired. I just wanted to point out it can take up to 195 years for those just entering the green card waiting line to receive permanent residency. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. And with that, we recognize Representative Buck for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Skorkin, I want to visit with you. You mentioned in your testimony that there were 5 factors that really caused in part the issues that we have with the doctor shortage in this country. And I think that you really, perhaps because of a liberal bias, perhaps because of other factors, you've really understated some of the other issues that exist. My friend and colleague from California, Mr. McClintock, has pointed out the vax mandate and the serious consequences to our healthcare system as a result of that. And my friend from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, has talked about the crisis at the border. And we not only have people coming into this country that have diseases that stress our healthcare system and frankly, cause illness and injury to our border security patrol officers. But we also have illegal drugs coming into this country across our southern border that stresses our healthcare system. Fentanyl has been a scourge in this country. Heroin has been a scourge in this country. Neither of them are produced in this country. They are both imported illegally, mostly across the southern border. And we also have an overwhelmed immigration system that just can't handle the kinds of things that we're talking about, much less putting on another burden, another stress with the necessity of looking at applications from doctors overseas. And so I think you really should acknowledge that there are more than 5 factors that cause the problems that we're dealing with. It's not just an aging population. It's not just a growing population. It is really a series of very poor policy decisions that have been made by the Biden administration in particular that have caused additional stress to our system. But I have a question for you, Dr. Skorkin. I'm wondering what percentage of doctors that come into this country and or medical students that come into this country and who receive a taxpayer subsidized, not completely paid for necessarily, but taxpayer subsidized education, and then go to work in areas that are hard to recruit doctors for, either rural areas or some of the more dangerous urban areas. How many of those doctors stay 5 years, 10 years, and continue to practice in those areas?
Thank you very much for your question, Representative Buck. I don't have the answer to that, and I will get back to you very quickly for the record within a couple of days at the most, so I can answer that question. And since I've garnered the floor, I just wanted to say 2 other things very quickly. I think that the subcommittee deserves to have some reconciliation between the numbers I'm giving you and the numbers that Mr. Lynn is giving you. And I want to make this offer to Mr. Lynn. We are both children of immigrants. I would like to make the offer to work with subcommittee staff and Mr. Lynn so we can reconcile very different numbers that you're hearing so that we can give you something that you can hang your hat on. And the other thing I must say is that I take extreme umbrage for Mr. Lynn characterizing the graduate medical education system as profiteering. It's a negative cost center.
You made 34.
Look, I'm not here to look. My time. You're both wrong. I don't give up the floor so you guys can argue. You can do that on your own time. Dr. Skorkin, another question. Would you find the number 50%, the 50% of the taxpayer subsidized students, medical students in this country, get their taxpayer subsidized education and leave the country to go back to their country of origin? In other words, Americans are paying for doctors in other countries to get their medical education and work in those other countries. Would that number surprise you?
I can't tell you whether it would surprise me or not. I've never looked at that number, and I'd have to know, Representative Buck, whether they left because they were unable to get permanent residence in the country or what the reason was. I'm very glad to look into that, as I told you, and I promise you I will get back to the committee quickly for the record.
Okay, and I thank you for getting back to me on that issue. I do have to say that I am really distressed that the committee, this subcommittee, has not addressed some of the underlying causes and just automatically defaults to a position of bringing in foreign nationals to deal with our medical shortages in this country. I think we've got to look at a much more encompassing and holistic approach. And with that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Representative Correa is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank all our witnesses for joining us here today. It's a very important issue that we have to address, which is really the healthcare of our society today as we age, as we grow in population. I agree with some of my colleagues. We have to look at all the options, including adding more slots to educate doctors here in America. Not only doctors, but nurses. We've been importing nurses from all over the world for decades. My wife right now, my spouse, is a OB-GYN at Kaiser. And I can tell you right now, she's going through burnout. She's working way too many hours. And when they call her in because another one of her colleagues can't come in, she just will not say no. She goes in, and it's tough time. But thank you, the witnesses. I have a couple of quick questions for Dr. Skorton. First of all, confirm, you said 23% of physicians in the US are foreign born. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's approximately right. Thank
Did
you.
we have a doctor shortage before COVID-19?
Yes, we've had a doctor shortage for a long time, especially initially in primary care behavioral health, but it's across all specialties. Yes.
And behavioral health is that issue of substance abuse, fentanyl abuse, drug abuse, mental health. That's what we're talking about, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Including
Thank you
both
very much.
substance abuse and mental health in general.
Dr. Skorton, very quickly, you mentioned 30,000 DACA health providers. Are you saying we have 30,000 health providers under the DACA program where they could be deported at any time should the DACA program be terminated?
I think the specifics would be that they would lose work authorization, Representative. But 34,000 is the number, and they sure could use that if DACA were rescinded.
They're productive members of our society, paying taxes, saving lives. And
You
as
bet.
my colleagues mentioned, frontline workers. Thank you.
You bet.
Dr. Lynn, Mr. Lynn talked about sideline doctors, residency mismatch. That brings back nightmares. When my wife and I got married a long time ago, we were praying, hope to God that she would match somewhere in LA, not Chicago, not somewhere else. Thank goodness that she did match, stayed here, we got married, and the story is a happy one ever after. But Dr. Lynn, and I'm going to ask Dr. Skorton, I want to find out, what is this thing about a mismatch, about sideline educated American doctors? Dr. Skorton, I'm going to give you the opportunity to answer that quickly.
The only answer that I can give without checking the numbers of Mr. Lynn, as I've offered to do, is to tell you that we depend on the residency training directors to do a very careful job of choosing the people who are most likely to benefit from residency training. And as I mentioned at the beginning, within 6 years of finishing medical school, 99% are practicing or in residency slots. And we believe that it's important to allow the residency directors to do what they're doing. It's also important for me to mention, Representative, that we're very concerned about students who do not match at the AAMC, very concerned, as are those at the medical schools. And they will work with those who didn't match to look at the reasons. Perhaps they matched only against a very, very competitive specialty. Perhaps they didn't apply to enough programs. Perhaps there was something in their application that could be better. And the medical schools are devoted to trying to help them. Perhaps Dr. Kura or others know about that particular status. And so we're also very, very concerned about it, sir.
Dr. Skorton, I'd love to take you up on your offer to help us reconcile some of those numbers for this subcommittee, because this is important for us as policymakers. You mentioned increase in freshman slots at medical schools, 33%, is that correct?
35%. Some of it was because of enlarging, and 30 new medical schools and 6 more on deck waiting for accreditation.
And I say this to you because it's very expensive to educate a doctor. And to hear that there's no match here, that doctors are sidelined, there's something here that's wrong. Love to work with you trying to figure this one out. But at the end of the day, 35% increase in freshmen, I would imagine that's still not going to address the doctor shortage moving forward.
One thing, Representative, is that we can increase the number of doctors in medical schools even more. But if we don't open up that blockage at the graduate medical education level, we will not have more doctors. taking care of patients. And so it's been a great thrill to see the 2-decade-long freeze lifted just in the last year and a half. And we're very much hoping that Congress, in its wisdom, will increase funding for Medicare funded GME slots, not for the doctors, but for the patients of America. We hope that will happen.
Madam Chair, I'm out of time. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Tiffany, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. Kura, it was implied earlier in some questioning that you were not welcome to America. Did the people of Poplar Bluff not welcome you?
No, it's never been that way. People of Poplar Bluff love me and continue to love me, and I know they will love me in future also. It is the way the system works. I never implied that people do not like me. Okay, I'll just expand on that a little bit. When I was trying to come into the United States across the port, I was questioned as to what the full form of H-1B is. I do not know the answer to that. I was questioned if I have applied for green card and how many days I would stay or how many years I would stay in this country. Well, I've applied for a green card, but I did not get it. Those kind of questions deter me from coming back into the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kura, and thank you for the work that you do. Mr. Lynn, why were residencies frozen? In earlier questioning, you mentioned that residencies were frozen. Why were they frozen?
I wish I had an answer for that, and I do not, but they were frozen in 1997. And that just demonstrates that.
What's been the impact of that?
Oh, well, the impact is one, as you're seeing, the number of residency opportunities based on the number of graduates from medical school, it's not being able to pair up. This is why we're seeing sideline physicians. And might I state, I'm happy to submit for the record how I came up with my numbers, because they take into account, for instance, when we did a deep dive into this in 2020, I looked at the matched, the unmatched with interviews, the unmatched without interviews, which is often not reported. And that's how we came up with our numbers.
I appreciate that very much. And I sure hope you share that with my office. We would really appreciate it. I remember when I sat on the Joint Finance Committee in Wisconsin that dealt with all things budget. And as a member of that committee, we saw the restrictions and what really were barriers to entry. And we created more residencies, including in rural parts of the state. And those have been filled. And so I think there are ways in which we can deal with this, but it's important that we as Americans, that we create policymakers, that we create those ways of doing it, including at the state level. I have to comment in regards to losing physicians with what's happening with the vaccine mandates. I've seen it locally. I represent a largely rural area in northern Wisconsin, and I have had friends who have lost their primary physician as a result of a vaccine mandate. And when you think about the Mayo Clinic, which is in our region, they lost 700 employees. Now, not all doctors, but they lost 700 employees as a result of vaccine mandates. When you see things like that are happening, the American public is going to be a little bit skeptical about claiming poverty, that we can't get enough physicians here in America when we're driving them out with vaccine mandates. I'd add one other thing. We heard about bringing all these people in from, bringing doctors in from Africa, from India and places like that. And we've been hearing so much about equity. And are we doing the right thing as Americans, taking doctors from poor countries? And I pose that as a rhetorical question. Should we really be doing that if we're going to just benefit the United States of America at the detriment of poor countries? For those that are standing on the equity ground right now, how do you support that? Just a rhetorical question. I would close by just saying this. Why is Secretary Mayorkas not here? Why is he not here? The preeminent issue, certainly one of the top 3 issues, if not the most important issue facing America right now, is a borderless southern border. And yet we still have not seen Secretary Mayorkas here. And the cynic in me asks the questions, Do you want to bring in more doctors because we have more fentanyl and methamphetamine overdoses than we've ever seen in America? Is that why we need to import doctors? Is it because of the increased crime, including the sanctuary cities of the Democrat-run cities that have been setting records for murder rates in America? Is that why we have to import doctors? Or is it the human trafficking? When we see, I've been to the border 3-4 times in the last 2 years, been to Panama, and the number of women that are sexually assaulted are incredible. I say to the advocates for more immigration that sit on this panel, America has deep concerns. Americans have deep concerns about what is going on. And some of this better get fixed. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you're asking for today, because Americans want the border controlled, and it is not now. When are we going to have
The gentleman.
that hearing from Secretary Mayorkas? I yield back.
Representative Garcia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses and for your patience in going through this hearing. It's been a very interesting topic. I know that this hearing alone will just add so much more and highlight the very many contributions that immigrants have made and will continue to make in the United States of America. To have to face a shortage of health professionals in this country is at the very least unfortunate and shameful, especially during this pandemic period. In my district, studies indicate that Houston has one of the lowest rates of healthcare workers among major U.S. metro areas. The Houston metro area has 3.35 healthcare workers for every 100 residents. That places Houston at number 10 on the list of major metro areas with the lowest share of healthcare workers per capita, including doctors, nurses, and therapists. And I can attest to this shortage because I can tell you that in my district alone, we have one small community hospital. We are essentially a doctor desert. But for the work of the FQHCs and other health clinics provided by the county or the city, we would not have health care in my district. As members of Congress, we have a duty to our constituents and the nation to develop a robust and comprehensive healthcare system to meet the needs of all Americans, especially our most vulnerable communities. I know that thousands of healthcare professionals are knocking at our doors every day, ready, willing, and able to provide the essential services that people in my community and across America need. So we need to do everything possible to keep those doors open. I wanted to start with you, Dr. Scarton, and I too am very interested in reconciling those numbers because it doesn't seem to me to be that easy that maybe 10,000 doctors were fired because they didn't want to get a vaccine and that maybe 10,000 were matched and that would be enough for its shortage. It's not really quite that simple, is it?
Well, I think a general statement I could make, Representative Garcia, is that we need more doctors, more American doctors, more doctors from overseas. We need more doctors in this country. And as been said by several of the witnesses today, we need more residency slots. We need more graduate medical education. And so we need to put our shoulder to the wheel and make sure that this happens. It's critically important. And the reason it's important is that we need to be there for districts like yours and throughout the country, urban and rural, we need more doctors.
Right. You know, the whole residency thing has really caught my ear because it's this match question. And I have a niece that's a pediatrician. And I remember when she was excited that day and got her match and she went on to do her residency. Who decides on the number of residencies and what other factors influence that? Surely they don't sit there and go, oh, here's the pile of the foreign trained doctors. We're going to do those first. I mean, they don't pick and choose that way, do they? Do they not use objective criteria to decide who gets matched with whom?
They sure do, Congresswoman. They sure do use objective criteria. And those criteria include a whole panoply of things. Obviously, the scores on tests, obviously how the person has done in medical school, obviously the recommendations that they get, and certain specialties are extraordinarily competitive. and others are less competitive. And so it's a wide variety. And I must give a public tip of the hat to those who run the residency training programs throughout the country. It's a difficult job to do. It's, as I mentioned before, it's a negative cost center. If we were making money on it, then every hospital would want to have teaching facilities, but it's not the case. Only a minority of hospitals do this because it's complicated, it's costly, and it's draining to the system. So it is based on a variety of criteria. And although nothing is perfect, I have great confidence in the overall system. And yet it is very important that we figure out, for those who do not match, what we can do to help them going forward. And as I mentioned, this is a high priority for us at the AAMC, Congresswoman, and for the medical schools themselves.
Real quickly, because I'm running out of time, Ms. Harris, we're really just focused on immigrants who have been trained here. They may be foreign born, but they were trained in America. Do you know how many of those may have come to America through the southern border?
When you say through the southern border, do you mean without authorization?
I just mean coming through the southern border.
Coming through the, okay.
I
So,
always leave that up to the immigration justice to decide whether they're authorized or not. It's not my job.
Okay, very briefly, nearly all foreign-born physicians in the United States doing graduate medical education are doing so through a visa that got stamped in their passport by the US government. The very minor exception, and I can get these numbers to you, I think the AAMC may have them as well, would be what we call DACA. So there are some DACA medical students who I believe may have matched into GME, but that would be the only subcategory that would not have already been vetted by the US government before they ever arrive for the purpose of graduate medical education.
So none of these folks are adding to this so-posed crisis at the southern border?
No, not at all.
Thank you,
gentlewoman.
And I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Jackson Lee, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Representative Jackson Lee, you're muted. You're recognized for 5 minutes. There we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses. Dr. Scorton, I'm going to focus a lot of my questions on your testimony, and thank you again for leading the nation's doctors. Living as well in Houston and interacting with the Texas Medical Center, but also the public health system, which is Harris Health, portions of which are in my congressional district, and spending a lot of time on the journey that we took with the pandemic. Have worked, and I'm sure you're aware of Dr. Peter Hortez and the enormous work that he has been doing, and have worked with him extensively throughout a number of infectious disease, Ebola, West Nile, et cetera, that doctors, researchers are crucial. There are individuals in the Texas Medical Center that are still attempting to get citizenship. They are either legal permanent residents, or they have the physician status, and they're not even at that point. And it does cause a depression, if you will, in the level of research and the amount of expertise that we have. So I happen to be one that believes that we can answer the points that have been made by our minority witness. I happen to believe we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There is no doubt that medicine is international. You actually may want the expertise of international research to provide Americans with the very best medical care that they can. I think the brain drain of training foreign doctors and then losing them is also a concern. And so we must find, just like we have to regularize immigration, we must find a crucial way to be able to address that. So hopefully I've laid the groundwork for a number of questions. One, my empathy for individuals who have bought into social media and not gotten vaccinated and who are in the medical arena is limited at best. You might comment, but also I want to make sure that you give us your best answer on how we address the question from the American Medical Association's perspective on dealing with doctors, foreign doctors. I guess I just missed that exact point that you like. And then answer the question about homegrown doctors, in particular, the African-American community and the low number of doctors, and how we cannot be attacked by supporting the reality of importance of doctors who are immigrants, but also push this idea of ensuring where there are depressed areas without African-American doctors, that we can do that as well. That's why I focused on you, doctor, and I yield to you at this time.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Very, very important questions. I'll try to be brief. First of all, my colleagues at the Association of American Medical Colleges would want me just to, for the record, to say that we don't represent the AMA, but the Association of American Medical Colleges, and that is the medical schools, teaching hospitals, and academic societies. The failure.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
No, thank you for allowing me to. Our failure, especially to get African-American men in medicine, is one of the failures of my generation of leadership. The year that I started my first faculty position, Congresswoman, 1979-80, up till last year, we didn't change the proportion of Black men in medical schools by even 0.1%. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we are beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. As was mentioned, I believe actually by Mr. Lynn, applications to medical schools are very high. And last year we saw not only a great increase in applicants from the African-American and Hispanic community, but increases in matriculants from both of those communities. In passing for the record, let me just say, however, that in the Native American and Alaska Native communities, although we saw an increase in applicants, we actually saw a decrease in matriculants. Secondly, I would say that there are some other good ideas, especially thinking about the pathways to a medical career. And I personally, having been in higher education for a long time, think that we need to start earlier in the educational pathway, perhaps as early as middle school, and helping people to dream about a life in science and medicine. And also, I wouldn't want to yield the floor without saying what a treasure to the country the Texas Medical Center is in every field of medicine, and Dr. Hotez as well. Thank you.
Can you just quickly answer the question about what we need for the immigration, the doctors who are immigrants? That's what I asked that as well.
Sure. There are a few things, and you can get the most authoritative advice from Kristen Harris. We're very lucky to have her as a witness, but I'll just tell you that if we could have a pathway to citizenship through DACA, and if we could do something with the Conrad 30 program to increase the number of slots in that program, that would be a pretty good start. And in my longer submitted testimony, Congresswoman, there are a few other areas that we think would also be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman's time has expired, and Chairwoman Lofgren is recognized for 5 minutes to close us out.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses. Just a couple of thoughts. It's a rare occasion when we have witnesses that have actually testimony that is, I'm sure, offered in good faith and under oath that is factually at odds. So I am looking forward to getting the further information from Mr. Lynn and the further analysis by Dr. Skorton, so we can sort through how this divergent testimony can be reconciled. And I'll just say that when that happens, we will make it part of the official record, obviously, and I'm very interested in it. One question I guess I have is whether the discrepancy relates to the nature, whether it's an MD or a different type of degree. I hope that that can also be addressed when the analysis is made. Ms. Harris, I heard your testimony as an expert on immigration law, talking about adjustments to the Conrad program, the per country cap, DACA, and the like. But as you may know, the House recently passed the American Competes Act, which, among other things, would exempt immigrants who undergo U.S. medical residency and fellowship programs from the numerical limits on green cards. Wouldn't that actually be a simpler way to just deal with this whole issue?
Absolutely, and it's I make reference in the written testimony at greater length, but basically, so long as technical corrections are clarified such that all of those would be outside of the country limit, that would be an elegant solution, absolutely, to taking all of these physicians outside of the country limit. Absolutely.
I would just note that in order to be qualified for a green card, you need to actually prove that there is no American citizen or legal permanent resident who is able and willing to take the job that has been offered to you. So that is the standard, and only in that case are you qualified for that visa. I'm just interested as well, Dr. Cora, thank you for your service to your patients. And one of the things I note in the immigration field is that people in underserved communities are so grateful to the physicians who come in to take care of them. I remember when we were pursuing adjustments to the per country cap that I think has become politically more fraught at this point, unfortunately, because of actions taken by the US Senate, talking to a physician from India and his wife, who was also a physician in a little town in Iowa. And they practiced together, and they were the only doctors in that town. And they were both on H-1B visas. He was, and she was exempt. But the problem was that they had, looking at a 50-year wait for a visa, and their children as dependents had grown up in the United States. And when they reached 21, they were going to have to return to India, even though their parents were living in this little town in Iowa. And they were considering, and I think in fact ultimately did, leaving their patients for the sake of their children to go to Canada, where they got the green card equivalent in about 5 months. Is that a phenomenon that you've seen around the country among immigrant physicians, Dr. Kura?
I have, thank you very much, first of all, for the question, Madam Lofgren. Yes, I do have one dentist who has left the country to Canada, and one rheumatologist who has left the country for Canada. My wife is a rheumatologist in Sykeston, a small place in Southeast Missouri. She is booked out for 6 months. I mean, the earliest she can see a new patient is 6 months down the road. Such is the state of affairs. And we can always have.
Thank you, Doctor. My time is just about to be expired, and I know the chairwoman is going to insist on it, but I'll just say this, that there are a lot of things we need to do. We need to make sure that medical education isn't as expensive, crushingly expensive. We need to make sure that we have enough slots for training, but those aren't within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. This issue is, and I think this has been an important hearing, and I yield back to Ms. Scanlon with thanks.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Without objection, I'd like to enter statements from the following organizations and individuals into the record. We have a letter from the International Medical Graduate Task Force to HHS, a statement from the American Medical Association, and a statement from the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. We also have an individual statement from Dr. Jeffrey A. Singer, a senior fellow with the Department of Health Policy Studies at Cato. That concludes today's hearing. I'd like to once again thank our panel of witnesses for participating in this hearing. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.